Hey pod people, Kate here talking about exercise. I get a lot of questions from you guys about exercise. People want to know what's the right kind of exercise, how much do we need to do, how does it change as you age? And not only do we get into how Ayurveda looks at exercise and the different components of you that are important to understand before you move into a movement regimen. I also am going to do some candid shares in this episode about my own experiments and my own journey over the last few decades as a very active person who is starting to feel a little bit older. So, if you want to hear about a personal journey, completely honest, stick around and we'll get there right after this. Welcome to Everyday Ayurveda with Kate, a podcast that translates ancient wisdom for modern lives. I'm your host, Kate O'Donnell. I've been living and teaching Ayurveda, India's traditional medicine, for over 25 years, and I've authored 4 best-selling books on bringing Ayurveda practices into our lives. If you're tired of battling digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, menopause symptoms, or are seeking a deeper spiritual connection and purpose, you're in the right place. This podcast is for you, offering practical, accessible advice to help you heal through diet, optimize your daily routines, and enhance your overall well-being. Follow this space for insights on a diet that heals, strategies for better digestion, sleep, hormone health, and direction for finding a deep sense of meaning and purpose. Join me, my pod people, for this empowering journey into self-care and self-discovery. Together, we'll explore how to bring balance and vitality into your everyday life. Let's do this. I get a lot of questions about exercise, and I want to do a podcast about that because in Ayurveda, when we talk about exercise, sort of like what's the best kind of exercise or what's the right kind of exercise, we have to look at certain factors. And these are factors that we look at in Ayurveda when we pretty much talk about the efficacy of anything. So whether it's food or biorhythms, exercise, we're looking at the constitution of the person. So what is the elemental composition of the person? Do they run hot? Do they run cold? Are they on the heavier side or on the lighter side? We look at all these sorts of things. We look at the age of the person. We look at the climate that the person lives in, and more specifically, also the season that they're in. For people who live in seasonal climates, we look at the time of day that the person is exercising. So we're going to break all of this down, and I'm going to tell you sort of how Ayurveda looks at exercise, but I'd also like to share with you my personal experiences. I worked in the yoga field in a city for 12 years full time. So I've been around a lot of sort of studio classes and the conversation in the fitness space and in the yoga space. I've been involved in that for many years. And that also informs sort of how I talk about exercise, having been around a lot of people exercising, right? And yoga is not exercise. Yoga is a completely different system. But a lot of people are viewing it as exercise and using it as part of a fitness program. So that's why I bring that in here. So when we talk about exercise, a lot of the Ayurvedic view is baked into the word. So vyayama, exercise, means that which makes the body tired. So exercise is actually anything that makes the body tired. Now, this is an interesting point already because a lot of people are tired, right? A lot of people are tired all the time. And some people will say, I'm too tired to exercise, while other people will say, I feel less tired when I exercise or after I exercise, right? So that's also interesting. And I think we need to unpack that. I think it's confusing. You can feel sometimes like you're in the moment, you're thinking, wait, do I need rest or do I need to exercise? So let's look at it all one thing at a time, starting with the elemental constitution of a person. So in Ayurveda, we sort of look at bodies according to their qualities. So whether they're hot, cold, heavy, light, how much moisture is in the body. And we categorize these into loose sort of, you could say body types, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, which I've talked about on this pod before. So our Vata types are the ones that are going to be dry and they tend to be cold and light. So there's not a lot of excess tissue. There's not a lot of excess fat or water in the body. These people probably won't sweat as much. They'll have a hard time sweating. Exercise is fantastic in the case of a cold person because it can warm them up. But if we overdo it, we can very easily, with this sort of light and more sensitive body type, we can really easily offset the status quo. And Ayurveda would say a Vata type, a person with this sort of drier, colder, lighter body type, actually does not need as much exercise. And the thing we'll notice in this body type is often that the nervous system is sensitive as well. And so we're really watching for sort of the resiliency of this person. And we don't want to push them too hard. We don't want them to sweat too much and dry out. We don't want them to lose weight. And we don't want to push them to the point where they are tired, because these lighter, more sensitive body types, they get tired easily. So they do not need as much exercise. They're also it's a very mobile constitution. These people tend to be moving a lot. They have a hard time sitting still to begin with. And it can actually be more efficacious for health for a Vata type person to learn how to be quieter and how to still the movements of the body. So this body type might do better with like a slow flow kind of a thing. We're moving like a qigong or a tai chi potentially. We're moving, but we're not putting so much stress on the body. And the joints tend to be drier here as well. So we do really have to protect the joints in these people and make sure that they're not, let's say, overstretching the joints or putting undue amounts of pressure right on the joints. So Vata types also, I think it's a good case to make here for these people to have like a trainer or a teacher, or someone who's making sure that they're moving properly. Again, because this is the body type, because it's light, because it's dry, is the most prone to injury. So these folks do need to be a little more careful. When we're looking at a Pitta type, that's the people who run hot. They have more fire element in the body. Sometimes there's an oily, moist component here. In many cases, however, a Pitta type will also, that amount of fire is also drying. So the question about how much moisture is in a body is a really important one in how we look at what's sort of helpful and non-helpful for these bodies. So one thing we know about somebody who's running hot is, according to Ayurveda, we'd want to be careful that their exercise regimen is not overheating them. So this is somebody who, when they start to feel the heat sort of reaching a certain point, would want to sort of slow it down, right? And cool it down. Pitta types of all the body types love exercise the most and can get sort of obsessive about it potentially, and are the types who might try to stringently follow a very intense program, regardless of what the body is telling you. So it's a very competitive sort of vibe that comes with fire element. If you think about fire element, it's just going to go burn, right? And so that's how these people are. You send them to say a cycling class, they're just going to go burn. That's what they're here to do. They're not here to like pay close attention to the body and listen to that knee that's been bothering them and that sort of thing. So in that way, the Pitta type also needs to be aware that they can be their own worst enemy when it comes to exercise because of the tendency to overdo it. So things like, let's say, a hot yoga or any kind of activity that's like heating the body up for a long period of time. So generally, we wouldn't want to put a hot body type in a hot room exercising. We'd put them in sort of just a regular temperature room rather than doing exercise heated. And things that are cold and cooling and being in a cooler room while exercising would be beneficial and strengthening for this person. Because interestingly, when Ayurveda talks about exercise, it's specific to the temperature, the season, and the climate. So when it's hot out, The sun element, it's said that the sun is actually sort of stealing the moisture from the body and taking away the strength of the body. And if you think about really hot weather, it's true, right? You got to think if it's over the 90 degrees and above, that's the kind of weather that makes you not want to do anything, right? You just want to lie around and the body it feels tired. And the idea is that sun also evaporates the moisture from the body and sort of dries things out. That's going to not be true for those of you who are in a really humid, dank, tropical climate or like the southeast of the United States in the summertime, right? There's a lot of moisture around. So you'll be sweating just sitting there, right? Your body's trying to cool itself. At that kind of heat, though, you can feel how it weakens the body, right? Imagine those temperatures and how you feel. Whereas cold weather or the winter season is actually said to strengthen the body. And so that's the time of year when we would do more exercise in cold weather. And your pitta types are going to feel awesome and feel strong in cold weather. And they might gravitate towards things like skiing, outdoor, winter, cold sports. And that kind of thing can make you feel really great. So there'll be probably a decent amount of sweating. There's water in the body and the constitution. And I think the main thing to keep in mind here is that sort of maybe obsessive nature of a pitta type to want to potentially overdo it. That is the danger with exercise. And also with this constitution, the tendency might be to put the program ahead of how the body actually feels. That not that anyone can't do that. I think a lot of us do that, but that's especially dangerous here with these people who do tend to push themselves and really like to be competitive with themselves and feel inspired by really working out strong. So it's important here that this person also is taking time to do things that kind of cool out and calm the system. In addition to the exercising, it's almost like the more exercise you're doing, the more you have to make sure you're balancing that with the appropriate amount of sort of resting and activities that kind of calm things down and keep you mellow. Our third body type, our kapha types, those are the ones with the heavier body type, bigger bone structure, more tendency for adipose tissue, fat tissue, more water in the body for sure. These people will sweat profusely when they exercise. And this is the strongest constitution. They don't run hot. They run a little bit on the cool side. So actually warming up the body and releasing that water from the body. In Ayurveda, fat tissue is composed of earth and water. And so when we let go some of the water, we remove some of the water from the fat tissue, but through sweating, it's going to make it easier for the body to break that down. So for this body type, or where there are cases where there is an excessive amount of fat tissue on the body, yes, they will be more sweating. And yes, that's a good thing. We actually want to get rid of that extra water. And then you're more likely to get rid of that extra tissue as well. So things that sort of work a person to the point of sweating for this body type are fantastic. And even if you're one of the other body types, but you have an excessive amount of fat tissue on the body, then you'll want to try to work to the point of sweating. And these are the types that are very strong. These kapha types are strong and can really thrive with hard work. Like something like landscaping or construction are fantastic vocations for this body type. And the flip side is that without regular exercise, potentially daily movement, this body type is very easily going to move towards heaviness and stagnation. And that can happen in the mind, that can happen in the body, which is sort of feeling heavy and crappy when you're not moving. So exercise is like number one medicine for this heavier, more watery body type. It's not the same prescription, let's say, for everybody, right? For depending on what's going on in the body, how much water is there, whether it's hot or cold, how heavy or light it is, the way we look at exercise will be different. So let's say something like we want a kapha type, a heavier body type, to exercise, work out, or at least move in some way every day. We want a pitta type to work out, let's say a couple times a week, but also have some interval rest days. And our Vata types, our lighter, colder body types, they don't need to sort of work out hard very often at all. And if they do, they just need to be aware that they have to take care to nourish the body, to put back whatever moisture has been lost, etc. So we look at, the different types of bodies to see what's the right amount of exercise. Then we also want to look at the climate or the season. So again, people who live in cold climates will feel better when they exercise more. And winter is a time where more exercise is actually indicated. Where in the spring, where it's a damp season, there's also a lot of kind of excess water in the world, right? As your snow is melting, it tends to be a rainy time. So if you're in a wet spring, that's also a really good time for movement. Movement is cleansing, it reduces, it detoxifies. That is the time of year where the body wants to do that. It wants to get rid of sort of winter doldrums. And then in the summer, again, it has to do with the heat, how hot it is. You might find that you don't need as much exercise. In the summer, it's like all the juices are flowing because of the warm weather. All the juices are flowing in the body. The circulation's moving a lot better on its own. Whereas in winter, we might need to pump it, right? We might need to actually get the pump going more often in order to really feel vital in the winter. So summer, it's a funny time because what I've noticed in New England, it's like people put away their running shoes in the winter and everyone's just kind of inside all the time. And then it gets warm out and everyone starts getting on their exercise regimen. So that is kind of a kind of opposite to, according to Ayurveda, what would be an ideal sort of annual rhythm. The annual rhythm would be to sort of slow down on your exercise a bit in the summer, where I find in the summer, I'm moving all the time anyway. I mean, exercise doesn't have to mean, you go to a class or you go to a gym or something. It's also like you ride your bike somewhere instead of driving your car, or you're swimming in the ocean. There's so many things that we do, especially in the summertime, that are active. So I'm doing so many active things in the summer. I've got it covered as far as movement goes. I really have to think about it more in the cold weather and really establish some kind of a routine that gets me moving. And in the fall is the time where we go from the hot weather to the cold weather. It's like a Vata time of year. It's a time where there'll be more sensitivity. You have to like really watch out for your joints, take care of your joints. They're going to feel that cold weather first. They're going to feel that dryness as the moisture comes out of the air. The colder it gets, the drier it gets. So that kind of a thing is during that transitional period is a good time to just pay close attention and note that maybe you have to kind of back off some of your intense exercise at certain times while it's like when it's first cold. And then once your body adjusts, you'll feel strong again. And so then we're moving into the winter. And that's the time where actually the strongest exercise is most supportive for the body, because that cold is also, imagine how it kind of slows things down and constricts the tissues. So movement's going to get things flowing again. So you might notice, if you pay attention, that you naturally gravitate in certain directions depending on the season, depending on the weather, and that you need maybe different amounts of exercise at different times of year. That makes sense that your program might shift a little bit. Now, I know there's a lot of people who are athletes who have specific goals, right? So it's like no matter what season it is or what time of year it is, you're working towards specific goals, like you're trying to run a marathon or something, right? Those people, let's put them in a special group, right? For this conversation, where they are, we want to make sure or assume that these people are taking extra special care of themselves because of these athletic goals. I feel like that goes without saying, but maybe not, right? It's important to remember that if you're going to start getting involved in a lot of vigorous exercise or vigorous activity, that you're going to have to make sure that you balance that by having appropriate amounts of rest, appropriate nutrition, which we'll talk about here, and enough sleep. And also that you're I would say aware of the seasonal effect on your training. It might make it easier or harder to maintain your goals depending on the season. But the good news when you put on your Ayurvedic lens here is that you're not thinking, why am I being thwarted right now? Why is my knee bothering me? You just be like, well, the weather just got cold. This is going to be going on for a couple of weeks. Let me make sure that I, wear my knee brace or apply warm oil to my knee before I exercise, until the body sort of adjusts into warm weather. So when you put this seasonal viewpoint on top of your exercise program, it can help you also understand when your body starts talking to you, what it's trying to say, instead of just trying to push forward into the goals. Because one thing we want to do when we're working towards athletic goals is definitely not hurt ourselves, right? You definitely don't want to get hurt. And so this seasonal viewpoint on things can really help you look at your training over the course of an annual rhythm and notice that there might be changes, although your big picture goals are certainly something that you can continue to always work towards. So the last thing we're looking at here is also the age of a person. So we look at their constitution, their climate, and their age. And potentially, I would say that exercising or having movement practices gets more and more important as we age and really becomes a non-negotiable. So as we get older, it's like we're training to maintain our mobility for daily life tasks, right? So you want to be able to get in and out of your car. You want to be able to do yard work and clean your house. You want to still be able to do these things comfortably. That's the reason for exercising as you get older, is to really maintain the strength and mobility of the body. So the older we get, as you're probably aware, the harder it is to maintain muscle tissue. The body moves into a reducing place, let's say in the 50s and beyond, where it does become necessary to do weight-bearing exercise. I think we've all probably heard this by this point, whether it's your own body weight or using external weights, like putting, those Velcro pad things on your wrists and your ankles and taking a walk, or doing exercise with the weighted wrists and ankles on, or, training with dumbbells or using cables at the gym. There's all these different ways that we could sort of apply weight. I never thought about weight or worried about weight until I was like in my mid 40s. And then I started to think about falling, which was interesting. I think because it was happening to my dad. He started to fall down all the time, and then you start breaking bones. And I started to really think about how in Ayurveda, muscle tissue, the 7 different tissue layers of the body, they each have their own function or job that they do. And the job of muscle tissue is plastering. So the skeleton, the bones are like the bones of the house, like the frame of the house. So if you have a house just sitting there, you put up the frame, then you do the drywall, right? You kind of put the walls up in between the frames. That's sort of what the muscle tissue is doing. And when you get everything plastered over the whole frame of the house, the plaster is also supporting and protecting the frame of the house, and sort of vice versa, right? Of course, we think of our skeleton supporting our posture, supporting us from the inside, but the muscles actually plaster the bones. And as we get older and the bones do begin to lose density, that muscle tissue can pick up some slack. And I think the way I picture it, that I look at it, is like having a protective layer of muscle around the joint spaces in the body becomes more and more important. And that is something that I have taken to heart, so I'm really working on like thighs and butt, like sort of everything around the pelvis, shoulders, wrists, ankles. Like I want all those joints to be bearing extra weight now and keeping them strong. And the thing I like about using weights is that you can, if there starts to be a decline, you'll notice it right away, because if you were able to lift 15 pounds with this limb last year and this year you can't, that's a very clear indicator, rather than letting it get to the point where I used to be able to climb these flights of stairs and now my legs don't want to do it. I'd rather have this stuff show up earlier when I'm training at the gym, let's say, than in my life. And it wasn't until I started to feel like I was feeling I was having trouble getting my luggage into the overhead on the plane at one point. And I was like, okay, I'm too young for this, you know? And so I started working on the arms and sort of trying to gain that upper body strength. And previously in my life, before that was in my, let's say, early 40s, before that point, I never worried about strength at all. It was just there, I was always active, so it was never a thing. And it wasn't until my 40s that I realized I had to start thinking about it and building it. So to me now, exercise is actually, it's not about burning calories, it's about building that plastering around the joints and bones. And I want the body to be firm. That is one of the words that we use to describe the quality of earth element is firmness. So some bodies are firmer than others naturally based on the amount of that earth element they have. Those with the lighter, drier constitutions, those are our people for whom the weight training will be especially helpful. And Ayurveda teaches that we all move into that vata time of life. So when let's say for women, it's menopause and beyond. For men, let's say it's around the same kind of midlife, 50s and beyond, that we start to be more like a vata person. You start to be lighter and drier. The body dries out. The bones begin to dry out. It's natural. It's not an imbalance that these things are happening. This is the aging process. We can absolutely bolster this body against the inevitability of the drying out of the tissues, the bones, the skin, etc. There's absolutely so much that we can do. But it's important to note that these things aren't, let's say, imbalances that we want to medicate as soon as we notice them. It's more, how can we get more of that earth element in the body? And one of the ways is to build muscle tissue. And so it doesn't have to be, let's say you're plastering the walls. You've put up the house frame, you start plastering the walls. You want to put the right amount of plaster. More plaster is not necessarily better, right? Then it's going to start blocking, making it hard to run the electrical wires through the walls and things. So it's like the right amount. This is such an Ayurvedic idea to look at something like exercise and muscle strength as something that we want to find the right amount of and strike the balance of. Because when we're building muscle tissue in the body, what we don't want is for resources to be stolen from other tissues, like, say, the reproductive tissues, because the muscles tissue's kind of stealing everything, right? So the nutrition is important, of course, and also being in balance. So when my body feels like firm and strong, and I feel like I can do all the things I want to do, like throw my luggage around and lift a ladder to clean out the gutters, right? Get in and out of the car easily. Once all these things are like rolling smoothly, I'm good. I just want to maintain that. So that's how I'm looking at it, at this stage of life in my mid 40s. And that feels good. So I'll do a weight training 2 or 3 times a week. I don't feel like I need to do it every day. I'm also still trying to maintain some flexibility, some suppleness, let's say, through yoga and mobility practices. And my outdoor time remains the most important thing for mental health, which a lot of you probably find the same to be true. And so that needs to get kind of put into the mix as well. How much time is there in the day? And where are you going to put the energy? So I do really like a rotation of sort of outdoor activities, the weight bearing time at the gym. And then for me, there is still a component of yoga. It doesn't have to be yoga. I think it could be anything that sort of loosens the body, gets the fascia moving. It could be dancing. It could be, as I said, some of these softer forms of martial arts. There's probably so many that you know about that I'm not thinking of in this moment, right? But these sort of more, let's say, flowing forms, I feel like forms that flow and move sort of from one position into another, they do a very specific thing that I suspect is the fascia and the sort of connective tissue, and really keeps a certain mobility factor going in the body that is important to me. So if I feel like I'm doing some sort of a flowing movement like dance, right, where you're sort of going from position to position in this unbroken wave, I feel like that's the same kind of tissue movement I'm drawing on when I'm like bending over to pick up something I dropped on the floor, right? Or digging around in the trunk of my car, these kinds of things where the body's used to making these fluid movements because of a movement practice, then I'm able to sort of move more fluidly in my life. And that to me is different than the plastering action of a built muscle. So I'm doing a couple days a week of some sort of like flowing mobility type of practice. And then I'm doing a couple days a week of like activities outdoors. And sometimes I'll double up for sure. Well, I'll do a dance class, plus I'll take a bike ride, if there's time. And I understand that it can start to feel where you're like, oh my goodness, this is like a job. And for me, maintaining the feeling in my body that I want to have, it is part of my job. I mean, I do work in wellness, but it's a part of what I'm here to do. It feels like it's not a job to me as much as a purpose. It feels like a sense of purpose to me to maintain a healthy body, a balanced body where there's all the different tissues are doing their different jobs in the body. So I've got the plastering, I've got the mobility, I've got the joy as well. I think there's something about moving that is, when it doesn't hurt or there's no pain, moving is joyful, and I do think it moves mental stagnation as well as physical stagnation. And that to me is very important. It becomes more important in the dark time of year to me when there's less sun, but I do have to move more. So I ride my bike, I take walks, I push myself to be brisk sometimes when I'm walking. At other times, I just want to say relax the mind and just unravel if it's a busy day or something. And then I might walk slower on purpose, just chill, just a chill walk, So I have a fitnessy style of walking, and then I also have an unwinding sort of relaxed style of walking. And depending on my mental space, I'll choose one or the other. But I do notice in the dark time of year, I need the brisk walk a little more often. And this brings us to time of day. So the other thing Ayurveda is always looking at is not only the time of year, but also the time of day that we exercise. So one might want to say alter the exercise that you're doing or do it differently or do a different amount of it based on what time of day it is. Or potentially take into account the efficacies of different times of day when you're sort of planning your exercise. Now, I realize that a lot of us don't have a ton of choices about when we're going to do things, right? I think for a lot of people, it's early morning or it's evening, sometimes late afternoon, right? But let's say people are working sort of during the working hours, and there's what happens before that, and there's what happens after that. That's your available time. There's also the lunch hour exercise. I know some people who bust out 30 minutes of movement, take another 30 minutes for lunch. I mean, that's pretty fantastic. It does not have to take a long time. If you have found something that works for you, 30 minutes is fine. You don't have to overdo it, right? Or it doesn't have to take 2 hours or an hour and a half to get your body sweating, let's say, if that's what you're looking for. So if one had to choose between morning exercise and evening exercise, I would absolutely, hands down, recommend the morning. And there's a couple reasons for that. One thing to think about is your circulation and your heart. Just like how the flowers open in the morning and close at night. Imagine your heart is also like that. Like it wants to like pump the circulation and get things going more during the daytime hours and not so much at night. At night is when things are slowing down. So to exercise at night, like let's say after 6 or 7 o'clock, it's rowing the boat against the stream a little bit. In the morning, getting up, so going to bed earlier and getting up in the morning, that would be better than exercising at night and then sleeping more in the morning. Any day of the week, I would recommend the early to bed, early to rise over the opposite. So I've seen this work for people over the years where we'll discuss shifting from an evening exercise to a morning, and that you do have to adjust the body to the new wake up time and the go to bed time. And that takes a couple months to sort of shift it. But when people get it happening, I would say they always feel better. So what's happening in the morning, according to Ayurveda, is detoxification. Your body sort of has it's detoxed during the night while you were sleeping, while there was nothing else going on, nothing else to do. And that's why you generally sort of have to poop in the morning and pee in the morning. And sweating in the morning is also fantastic. It's also a way to kind of get out the things that have been cleansed or detoxed during the night. Exercising in the morning on an empty stomach also burns any toxins or poorly digested foods that are sitting around in the gut. And that's great, right? So I've been in the habit through my yoga years, I learned to exercise in the morning on an empty stomach. That was how the yoga was done. And I think it's fantastic for digestion. I think it's a fabulous detox as well. In the case of someone who has a really fast metabolism and does not want to lose weight or wakes up starving and doesn't have body fat to burn, those people might need to eat a little something. So this exercising in the morning on an empty stomach is not for everyone. A lot of people, on the other hand, can certainly benefit from it, especially those who are overnourished or have like a heavy feeling in the stomach in the digestion in the morning. It's fantastic. So you want to think sort of, there's the question of what's my body burning for this exercise, right? If you don't give it food, it is going to burn toxins. The fire's going to increase. You'll burn some toxins and you'll potentially get going into burning some fat tissue if you have some to burn. If you don't, that's when you might need some nutrition. And I think that's a fabulous regimen to do movement in the morning. Again, it doesn't have to be a super long thing so that you're getting to your breakfast at an appropriate time. And that question of eating or not eating before exercise, again, when a person is overnourished or is looking for a detox factor, that's where exercising on the empty stomach, you will get that. You will definitely get that. Now, some people have no choice but to exercise in the evening. If, say your mornings, you're already getting up as early as you possibly could and everything's full, right? So you got a lot going on and you want to do some exercise later in the day. Okay. I mean, I would say that's better than nothing, right? It's better to do it than not do it, most likely. And things to keep in mind about that are to eat a good lunch. Get more of your food happening earlier in the day so that after you exercise, whatever you're having is like a supplement. It's not like you wait all day and then you exercise and then you eat your main meal, because then you're really rowing the boat against the stream and your body will not detox while you're sleeping. Instead, it's going to be rebuilding after the exercise with the meal that you ate and really working to digest that food and get it into a place where it can build the body. So a big dinner is never indicated in Ayurveda. I mean, sometimes for fun, sure, but not as like your regular routine. It's better for your body and the way it's wired to nature to have more food earlier in the day. So that's where if you're going to exercise later in the day, I would encourage eating a good breakfast, a good lunch, and getting more of your food happening earlier in the day so you're not really dependent on that later meal. Because what happens when you exercise at night is you probably didn't eat yet, right? Because who wants to eat and then exercise? It usually makes you burp or makes your belly hurt. And your exercise is not so fun. So just being aware when you're exercising at night about the food bit, about the food piece, and taking care, eat more earlier in the day when that happens. Does it have to be the same time every day? No, not necessarily, although I think most people will feel like it's kind of an easier flow when it's somewhat regular. But again, as I mentioned to you guys, I have these sort of like 3 different buckets that my movement falls into. There's the outdoor stuff, there's the gym, the sort of weight bearing stuff, and there's the mobility stuff. And I don't always do everything at the same time of day. However, I've been well trained over the years to do something in the morning every day. And my body really likes that. My mind really likes that too. I personally need to ground the mind in the body first. That is, to me, the most important thing. of all in this conversation. More important than muscle, more important than fat, more important than toxin burning is grounding the mind into the body in the morning. And so I'm a professional, right? I've spent decades developing that skill. And so I know now what I need to do a breathing practice if I need to take a walk, if I need to be outdoors, or if I need to do some mobility stuff or some yoga stuff, or if I need to go pump some iron. I know the feeling in my body, in my mind of what needs to happen in order to get me where I want to go. And it changes seasonally for me. It changes seasonally. Beautiful day in the summertime, it's going to make me crazy to try to do anything indoors. So I'm just going to screw everything and be doing whatever I'm doing, get on my paddle board and get out on the water. In the winter, I can get very mentally dark. And so sometimes I need something that really increases fire element. And so it'll be like, we need to go like jam on the elliptical at the gym for 20 minutes and lift some weights. Sometimes I need to really move the energy in that way. And sometimes I need to really just settle it down. So I'll take one of my slow walks. And if you're listening to this and you're being like, wow, I wish I knew, I wish I knew what to do, For me, a lot of this was born of experimentation. I could not have recorded this pod 4 or 5 years ago when I sort of turned 40, let's say, and my body started acting differently. I started having more joint pains, more aches and pains in general. And I started getting tired more easily. And as I told you, was having a difficult time getting my luggage up into the overhead on the plane. And there were other little things like that. Like I was trying to use a hedge trimmer, chopped the top off one of the trees in front of the house because I wasn't strong enough to hold the hedge trimmer. So there's just little things like that where I was like, this is annoying. This is not cool. Or I'd be, on my paddleboard and I'd have to turn around because I was kind of worried that I was going to be too tired to make it back to my car if I kept going. Those kinds of things never were a part of my world before. I never had those kinds of limitations. Those of you who are, past, let's say 45, probably maybe know what I mean. I do have that lighter constitution, so I feel it earlier. If I had a heavier, more robust constitution, I might have got deep into my 60s before this started to happen. But for me, it was early, I was in my early 40s. And what I had been doing for so many years, which was just yoga and really nothing else, it didn't feel good anymore. It started to not feel like the right thing, but I didn't know what to do. I had never stepped foot inside a gym or lifted a weight in my life. I started the paddle boarding because I knew I needed more time outdoors for my mind. And it's been fantastic to have like an outdoor sport on the water. For me, that's great. And in the winter, I'll snowshoe, so I discovered snowshoes. They're very low infrastructure. You can go anywhere with them. I don't get lost in the woods because I can follow my tracks back. So I love to sort of go off-roading. And B, you don't need a ski area. You don't need groomed trails or anything like that. The whole point on a snowshoe is that you can really go anywhere you want. And they're easy. I just throw them in my car. Like it's just easy. So that's been another fantastic addition to my world for another outdoor thing. And then, of course, I just take walks. I just take simple walks around the neighborhood at different paces, as we've already discussed. But there was a period of time there, a few years, where I had to figure this out. So now when you hear me say that on any given day, I can tune into my mental state and feel my body and know what kind of activity I need to do. It's because of several years of experimentation. Honestly, guys, several years of experimentation of me just trying different things like going to a dance class, going to a martial arts class, not just once, but I would do things for at least 6 months or, something like that. Really give this thing a go and see how it feels and what kind of effect I'm getting from it. And I have hit upon, I'd say after probably 4 solid years, I've hit upon this trifecta of outdoor gym and yoga that's now I can say it's working for me, but As I said, I couldn't have recorded this podcast at any sooner time because I had to learn all this about myself. And I've had this exact conversation with friends over the course of these few years, and it's been really beautiful to see these folks feel free to start experimenting. So now I've got friends who are playing tennis, people who are doing kickboxing, people who are going to West African dance classes. A lot of people going to the gym now who say they were inspired when I started talking about it. So there's so many choices. And it's not to say that, like, I'm not here to do a podcast on exercise and tell you that this is the kind of exercise to do. It's more, these are the things you want to look for. What time of year is it? How old are you? What's your body saying to you? What is the kind of density or temperature and moisture levels in your body at this time in life and at this time of year? Like looking at all of that stuff and how it changes over the course of a year or over the course of 5 years. The thing is that change is always happening. And so the amount of exercise or the type of exercise or combinations of movements, practices that you're doing, those are also going to be shifting, as the years go by and as the seasons go by. And that's a fantastic thing as well. So what I want to leave you with on this topic is the importance of experimentation and the beauty and the glory of trying something new with your body. And I think the older we get, the more important that also becomes, is to try new things and get your body and your brain and your body working together in new and different ways. So another thing to consider is do all kinds of different stuff, right? I like a little regimen personally. I need a little regimen in order to I feel held by that. Otherwise, I'll go off the rails really easily and lose track of what I need to be doing in order for my body to sort of feel right, end quote, And thanks to Ayurveda, I know what right and wrong feel like in my body, and I know how to listen to what my body's telling me. It's this lens that has enabled me to do that. That's part of what I'm here to share with you. And that's how I know that I need a little structure in my routine. But I also know that a year from now, it's likely that my routine will have changed. So we'll check in again on that later. And I'm also looking forward to having some experts on the pod in the next season or two about exercise, different types, different approaches, and different types of athletes we'll be hearing from. And we'll sort of look at how these folks look at exercise and nutrition and what they've learned about this over the years and over the course of their experimentations. So enjoy your experiments. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time here on Everyday Ayurveda with Kate. Have a great day.